So there's a quote I love to post a lot that says, the same red flags you ignore in the beginning are the same red flags that will end your relationship. And this is so very true. I see it all the time where people overlook certain issues, try to sweep it under the rug, assume it's not that big of a deal, and later on it ends up blowing up in their face and causing the downfall of that relationship. Or not digging deeper into it doesn't allow them to identify what the other issues are that might be lingering in that potential relationship or ultimately in that relationship. For some, it even goes to marriage before they finally see it for what it really is. Either way, the goal that I have, or one of the goals I have, is to help you recognize these things as quickly as possible, but help you with how to properly navigate it. Now, some of you may feel like once you see a red flag, it's a wrap, it's done, you're gone, there's nothing to talk about. I don't agree with that, all right? Though, of course, I think there's exceptions to every rule. I think that my general rule for red flags is you see it, you address it, and if it can't be corrected, then you go, okay? Because sometimes red flags are misunderstandings, they're fixable issues, so we don't just want to jump to a complete negative conclusion without giving things an opportunity to see if it can actually be corrected, all right? But either way, red flags aren't just what people do, they can be what people say. And there are certain phrases that, again, I think they warrant raising an eyebrow and like, wait a minute, let me see what this really means, or let me explore this, or let me, take this into serious consideration, okay? So let's run through some of these things. And this first one, I didn't want to put it on here, but I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna put it on because it's a big common one nowadays. It's very recently popular. And that's the phrase. So one of the big red flags that men say, or a phrase that men say is a red flag, is what do you bring to the table? All right. Now listen, I understand the premise of the question. I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to see what someone perceives as their value that they bring to a relationship, okay? And I think both sides asking in so many words that same question essentially is not a bad thing. The reason why it makes the list of red flags is because that term, that phrase has become popular due to certain types of content on the internet today. And many times, not always, but many times, it is being regurgitated by men who have this underlying negative perception of women, who are looking to come into that conversation to already knock you down a few levels, devalue you, undermine whatever your response is going to be. And so that's the reason why it's like, okay, again, I don't want you to just run if you hear it, and I do want you to be able to answer that in a very genuine and what I believe is the most effective way. And just to point that out, you want to always lead with your character. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be good enough, that's going to satisfy every guy who asks that question, because again, some are asking with ill intent. But I do think that when you're asked what you bring to the table, your intangibles, loving, caring, nurturing, an ability to listen and communicate, all these things, take accountability, all these great qualities that we've talked about in so many different videos, I think that is what you should lead with. And then, of course, you can add the icing on the cake with the other things that you may have, with maybe what you've accomplished in education. That's cool, but that character speaks so much more loudly. But getting back to the fact that this is a red flag on the man's side, again, many are leading with that question with ill intent. So I don't want you to get defensive when you get asked that question, but I do want you to dig deeper. So after you respond and respond in a very, as I said, effective manner, I think you have to just consider, okay, like, what kind of content does this man consume? What is his perception of women? Even asking him in return, what do you feel the value is of a woman in a relationship? All right? Because again, if his perception of where he places value on women does not align with you, then right there we can just eliminate this being a potential relationship. Okay? So we save a bunch of wasted time. Also, it is very likely or very possible at the very least for him to any negative perceptions he may have, if he is that guy that was asking with ill intent, that follow-up question is likely to bring that out, at least somewhat, all right? It's likely to expose him to some degree. So, and I think if he's not that guy, then he'll be able to answer in a way that's like, oh, okay, cool. I see he's not on any kind of negative stuff. He's not trying to attack or whatever the case may be. So I think that's a great follow-up to it, and just being mindful of where that comes from, so to speak, right? But again, there are going to be some guys who ask that and they never even watch that type of content. They don't have any negative perceptions. They just phrase it that way, and they're really trying to see what you feel is your value. And again, as I said in the beginning, nothing wrong with that aspect of it at all. All right. So now here's another phrase that some men say that is a huge red flag. And that is, I just got out of a serious relationship, or I just got out of a long relationship. Now, if they say long, that's pretty much the same as serious. All right? Like, you ain't been dealing with someone for a long time and there isn't some level of significance there. Like, it may not have been serious in the sense of where it was headed, right? And maybe how invested he was. But if it was long, there was a lot of energy spent there. There was a lot of time. There may have been baggage that was picked up from that, okay? And that's the same with the whole serious thing. Because here's the thing. When a guy says, I just got out of a serious relationship, one, that's usually kind of his way of saying, I'm trying to take things easy. I'm not really trying to jump back into anything right now, all right? He's still trying to get over whatever happened. And when I say get over, it may not even be like he's not over his ex. It may be just basically recharging from how exhausting and draining that whole experience was. And as a woman, you've gone through the same type of thing. Many of you have gone through the same type of thing, all right? So he's usually prepping you for like, hey, I'm not looking to jump right into anything serious, so I'm just letting you know what I've already been through. But the other aspect of it is, if he says, I just got out of a serious relationship, and this is a good follow-up question for you to ask, is like, well, have you recovered from it? Have you done any healing from that relationship? Now, granted, some people are going to be like, no, I'm good, I'm fine, or yeah, I think I'm healed, I'm okay. And that's not necessarily the truth. That's not necessarily actually accurate in their situation. But I do think it's still good to ask to see how they respond to it, to see if anything is exposed in that response from them, okay? But chances are, if they just got out of it, unless they can flat out say, yeah, I went to counseling and everything, they haven't fully healed, all right? Chances are. And not only that, the other question that has to come up is, all right, has that connect? I don't like using the word connection here. Has that attachment been completely severed? All right? Like, what's the degree to where, like, because if it's still fresh, this woman may still be trying to talk to him, as I'm talking about the ex, okay? There may be still some kind of things that are intertwined. Like, you got to get some details as to, okay, what's that all about? So you understand if the coast is really clear for you to proceed with this man, all right? So you want to have that discussion, and I have to just mention it. The same will go for you. If you just got out of a serious relationship, be real about and don't be so quick to jump into the next relationship. Make sure you do some healing. Make sure you do some decompressing, right? And releasing any of that baggage that came from that experience. So that you can really be ready to handle and nurture what may be in front of you that's something good, okay? So you got to be willing to go down that path. But yes, if he says that, it's definitely something to have a deeper discussion about to ensure you're not walking into a huge mess. All right, so another common phrase that men say that are huge red flags, and I'm just going to warn you, some of you have said this yourselves, and that is, let's just go with the flow, All right. Now, for any of you who have read my book, He's Lying, Sis, which I'll put the link below so you can get it if you want to get your own copy. I talk about the whole going with the flow issue. I even mentioned that in my other book, The Man God Has for You, as well. But the point is, I say it's a very dangerous phrase, and you can't just ignore that being said. Now, before I get into why, I understand some of you may not think it's a big deal because, as I mentioned, you yourself may have said, let's just go with the flow. You yourself was like, all right, I'm just trying to enjoy myself right now. But think about that. Think about the fact that where were you mentally and emotionally when you just wanted to go with the flow? There's a very good chance that you either wanted companionship, right? But you did not want the seriousness of what you felt may, and even the headaches that you feel come with relationships, right? So you're just like, I just want to enjoy myself, not even think about it, not stress about anything, which, again, if two grown adults want to agree to that, that's their choice. The problem is if at least one of those adults really is trying to date intentionally and want something serious, well, this is a huge risk and a huge problem because typically that go with the flow has a very low probability of turning into, okay, yeah, I want something serious now and let's make it happen. Not saying it's impossible, but very low likelihood. And so if you were in that mindset when you said those types of things, for those of you who have, well, imagine where he's at, right? So when he's being that vague, and the reality is that the majority, not all, but the majority of men who use the go with the flow phrase have no intentions of trying to be serious with you. All right, none. And they don't want to be held to any expectation of it. So the go with the flow eliminates that. All right, it's just like, hey, let's just have fun, enjoy ourselves, whatever. Whatever happens, happens. Okay? And that way, if you start to then develop deeper feelings and want something serious, he can always fall back on, well, I never told you I wanted to do anything serious with you. I never told you I was looking for a girlfriend. I never told you I was interested in marriage. All I told you was, let's just go with the flow. And you can't hold them to anything. You know what I'm saying? At least you're going to have a hard time doing so. So with that said, you really got to ask yourself, if a man says that to you, are you genuinely okay with that? Or are you going along with it because you feel like, well, if he just wants to go with the flow and I'm over here saying, well, I'm looking for something serious or whatever, it's going to run him away. And I always say you can't run a man away who wants to be serious about you. And if that's what you're interested in, that's what you're looking for, you got to stand on it. You know how they say stand on business? Like, that's the business you have to stand on. You can't deviate from that because now you're going to end up putting yourself in this cycle of dead-end relationships. And there was one time I read this book and it mentioned how one of the common themes of women who want marriage and are successful in getting there is they don't waste their time in dead-end relationships, meaning relationships that are not going to go anywhere. They're not going to proceed to that level. And to do that, you have to do things like properly evaluate these men as quickly as possible, as well as having an internal deadline as to what is long enough before he has to make a decision on where he wants to go with this. You can't let things drag out because I've seen go with the flow turn into 1, 5, 10 years. Yes, some people 10 years in a relationship or in a situationship, however you want to frame it, without any level of real commitment, without ever knowing, okay, if we're going to go to that next level with each other, and just now feeling this high level of unhealthy attachment that's difficult to walk away from because the woman has invested so much time and energy into this man. And I don't want that to happen to you because all that does is take you off the path that you belong on and take you away from having a much better chance at receiving what you truly desire from a man who's actually on the same page as you. So again, I'll give you this suggestion. If he says, let's go with the flow, you can't be afraid to say, nah, I don't do that over here. All right, like that doesn't work for me. What's the intention? What are you looking for? Just be real with me and let's make a decision if we want to move forward with this. Again, can we guarantee every man will be honest? No, but I think the man who's not looking to be serious more times than not in today's world is not going to make that proclamation when he has no intention of it. So if you put him on a spot where he has to give you some real level of what's his intention, it's going to expose or show more clearly he's just not on that. All right, so let's keep this going. And another phrase that some men say that's a huge red flag is, my ex was crazy. Okay? Now, let me start off by saying sometimes that may have been an accurate statement. Okay? It's not out of the ordinary for people to have experienced a crazy ex. I know that society tends to look at failed relationships as, what did the man do wrong, right? And that in many or almost in all cases, the woman is the victim. But there are many cases of men who have gotten with very unstable women, emotionally and mentally unstable, who have been what many would consider quote unquote crazy. But I do think that the term crazy, what I don't like about it, is very dismissive, and it doesn't always properly label what's going on or what was going on with that individual. Because a lot of times crazy is misunderstood. A lot of times crazy is damaged, hurt individual who needs healing. And that's the more appropriate way, in my opinion, to look at it. But I understand when you're going through, wild experiences with this person, your reaction ain't to look at it the way I just broke it down. You're just like, nah, this is just crazy. End of story. But the reason why this is a red flag to address and you want to dig deeper is because, one, again, as I said, though we acknowledge that there are going to be some situations where the woman was just on that type of time, a lot of times it is the man trying to oversimplify what the real issues are and not taking accountability for their contribution to her crazy. Like, it's one of the things I like to talk about is how sometimes women will message me about, am I being insecure if I do X, Y, Z, right? Or if I'm reacting this way. And I'm like, listen, there are people who are deeply insecure due to things that's happened in their past that they haven't resolved from, right? Or healed from. However, don't let that blind you from the fact that sometimes some of you are dealing with a partner who is doing things that understandably are making you feel insecure. Like, they are contributing or creating the insecurity within you, all right? That happens on both sides. So sometimes, yes, this man may have been contributing or creating the crazy. And so you want to get a better understanding of, okay, if he says she was crazy, what made her so crazy? Like, what was she doing? What was the problem? You know what I'm saying? Because we want to see, is this a man who is capable of acknowledging his role in an issue, or is he just putting it off on her to absolve himself of any wrongdoing? Because if that's the case, well, guess what? He's going to do the same thing to you. And you will be the next crazy that he talks about in the future. You see what I'm saying? So we've got to really investigate what's going on here. I also think that for some, you want to get an understanding of what this man even views as crazy, all right? What he would label as such, because again, sometimes very understandable reactions are being labeled in that way, and it takes away that person's ability to learn what they could have done better, all right? Because sometimes it's not like this horrible guy who's doing just bad stuff or whatever. There's a lot of men who just don't get it, who don't understand how the average woman may react to certain things, or how the average woman is wired, and how they have to go about things in a better way, how they have to be more compassionate or more sensitive or more empathetic to their partners, right? And if they can just be told in a way that they can understand, they actually will be able to make improvements. And I'm speaking from the position of someone who sat down with tons of couples, tons of men where the men were doing some stupid stuff, I'm sorry to laugh about it, they were just like, what are you thinking, man? But he really, or they, so because it happened so many times, they really just didn't get it. So all that to say, when you hear the crazy statement, let's find out what that was all about. And hopefully, because again, there's gonna be times where he's not willing to discuss those things. But I do think it's important because it really helps us to understand what kind of person we're getting ourselves involved in, right? And it's not that we want to hold whatever mistakes they made before over their head. We just want to see, okay, have you learned and grown from that? Do you understand how, okay, maybe that thing you were doing to her, that wouldn't work for me either. You see what I'm saying? So are we in agreement that that's not going to be a problem here, or are you still on that? That's why it's important to have these deeper discussions. All right, so we got a couple more left. Yeah, a couple more left. So another phrase that some men say that's a huge red flag is, I don't really know what I'm doing with my life right now. So, I'm a firm believer that if we're gonna have successful relationships, what is best in the majority of situations is for that man to figure himself out and at least have the proper foundation already in place. And for him to be the one to set that foundation. Not the woman creating the foundation for him, not the woman giving him his vision and plan. No, him figuring at least that part out. I'm not expecting men to be rich, right? I'm not expecting them to be perfect or anything like that. Just the foundation. And when a man says, I don't really know what I'm doing with my life, that's very dangerous ground to walk on, all right? Now, understand that even men who have found success may go through a season of doubt, of struggle, of having to recalibrate what they're gonna do. And maybe they've lost themselves in this moment. Or I'll give you even me, for example, I found success on my own, let's say Stephan's way. When I was younger, I was owning a bunch of properties. I had multiple businesses, and then all of it came tumbling down. And I went through a season of, I didn't know who the hell I was, right? And I didn't know what I was doing with myself anymore. And at that same time, I was going through this very deep spiritual journey of trying to figure out what God was doing in my life. This whole thing of even being closer to God and having God be at the forefront of what I do and trying to let him guide me. This was all new to me, right? And I went through what I call my wilderness period. And it was then me coming out of that with the understanding of where God was directing me that I was able to rebuild success, but this time do it God's way. So this is not to paint the man who doesn't know what he's doing with himself as bad, as weak, or anything, because again, it can happen to those who at one point thought they had their stuff together. However, with that said, I can tell you right now, it would have been a horrible thing for me to get into a relationship during that wilderness period. It would have been the wrong move 100%. And it would have been not just dangerous for me and where I needed to go in life, it would have been dangerous for any woman who would have tried to entertain it and think she could hold me up and help me. Because not to get too deep in it, I got plenty of videos on these types of things, but I'm going to say this. This is the part that's hitting my spirit the strongest. When a man is going through those periods in his life, some people need to hit rock bottom before they look up and see God and let God do the work on them, okay? And if you jump in, you're going to interfere with the process. And in that process, God is trying to teach that man to lean on him, not to lean on you, not to lean on his mother, not to lean on this one and that one. No, to lean on God and understand what he needs to do for himself. And we would and it's going to be so much more beneficial for everyone to let that man go through his process. All right? And again, Not that he has to come out of it, then become rich, and then he can have, no, once he gets his foundation, we're good. So all that to say, and I understand, not every man you're going to come across going through that is even a believer, right? And some of you may not be believers yourself, so that aspect of it, including God in the whole description of what I was just breaking down, may not be applicable to you. But I think even if you removed God from it and it's just a man who doesn't know where he's going in life and has to figure himself out, it's still essentially the same in the sense that he has to learn how to overcome that adversity and stand on his own 2 feet. So when he says, I do not know what I'm doing with my life, if you want to be an encourager, a supporter, whatever, at the most you can be a friend, not a romantic friend. Not this, we mess around, but we're just friends with benefits. No. Like platonic friend, if you can handle that, if you can honestly stick to those boundaries, okay? And it's not even anything wrong if you're friends with the understanding that there is interest there, but we're going to respect the fact that now is not the time. But the reality is that most people can't handle that. So for most people, you're not going to be successful just remaining a friend because your feelings are going to get deeper and attachments grow. But either way, that would be the only exception to me. Other than that, let him figure it out. Once he figures himself out, if he wants to come back and you guys want to try again, then you can possibly move forward. All right. So another phrase that a lot of men may use that's a huge red flag is, I'm really focused on my career right now. So, we're going to the flip side of what we just talked about. One guy doesn't know what he's going to do with himself, and this guy is like, I'm locked into my career. Now, of course, I'm a big believer in men finding their purpose, and they got to make that purpose a priority. So there's nothing wrong with that man being focused on his career. It's just that when a man utters that phrase, he's usually trying to say to you, don't expect too much from me right now. Don't expect too much of my time right now. And in many cases, don't expect for this to become anything serious anytime soon, if ever, right? He's kind of laying that foundation with that statement. Now, again, we don't automatically assume that, jump to negative conclusions and run. We ask questions. We say, okay, well, does that mean you're not really interested in trying to work towards a serious relationship? Does that mean you're just trying to have fun right now? Like, do not be afraid to ask, because again, I know there's a lot of you who are afraid sometimes to dig deeper because maybe the fear of rejection, the fear of, again, scaring him off, so to speak. But all you're doing is setting yourself up for a bigger headache by not gaining the clarity that you need as quickly as possible. And I know a lot of women don't ask the right questions because so many women will come to me and say, this guy said this, what does this mean? What did he mean by that? And I can give them what the possibilities are. I can speculate, right? But I always end up telling them, but listen, at the end of the day, why aren't you asking him what he meant by that? Why aren't you asking him for more clarity? Let him speak on it, all right? Because I can give you the possibilities, but I'm not him. And it's pointless to play that game, because then what ends up happening is you're probably not just asking me. You might be going to the friends, your family, whoever. What do you think he means? And now you're poisoning your mind with all these different possibilities, driving yourself crazy, trying to analyze, stressing yourself out, rather than just talk to the man and ask him to explain what is he trying to communicate when he says things like, I'm really focused on my career right now. All right. I think another good question to follow up with, if he says, let's just say you really like him, you think he's a really good potential candidate, and he says this phrase, I think what you can ask him is, all right, is there a timeline on this? Like, do you think you just need the next 3 months to lock in, and after that you should be good? or, we really don't know. This could drag on for a long time. Now, even if he says, yeah, I think just 3 months and I'll be good to go, you really have to ask yourself, can I continue to deal with this man for the next 3 months knowing this can't go any further, and not get so attached that if after the 3 months he says, I'm still not ready, you don't know what to do with yourself. You don't know how to walk away, and now you're feeling stuck. If you know you can't handle that, then it is best for you to be like, you know what? All right, cool. Well, how about when those 3 months is up and you are ready, hit me up. If I'm still available, we can see if we can move forward. All right? Don't play yourself. I see women do it all the time and get themselves in a whole lot of trouble. So be real about what you can handle. Ask that man for some clarity, but understand that, yes, that phrase is not to be ignored. All right. So now, last but not least, and let me just say, there's many other phrases we could talk about. Of course, I can't put everything on the list today. But for today, the other one that I wanted to mention is the phrase, marriage is just a waste of time, or marriage is a bad deal for men, or any phrase that shows he views marriage in a very negative way. Now, let's keep it real. Some of you might agree with him, right? Some of you may be on the same page. And if I will always say, if two grown adults are on the same page and no one's deceiving anyone, and if y'all like it, that's for you to choose to do. All right, I'm not saying you should, but that's your choice, okay? But if you know you are a woman who desires marriage, you can't tell yourself, oh, okay, well, maybe if I just talk to him and he really likes me, he'll change his mind. No. And you can't convince yourself, or you shouldn't try to convince yourself, well, maybe I don't need to get married. Maybe that I don't really want that. You got to be honest, because if deep inside that is your desire, convincing yourself in the moment is only going to, it's going to hide it, so to speak. It's going to suppress it for a little while, but it's going to come back out at some point. And one thing that I have seen and come across a lot is women saying to me, oh, I don't want to get married either. I'm okay with no marriage, but I at least want to be engaged. You hear what I just said? They said, I don't care to get married, but I just want to be I want to know that he's willing to get engaged. And I've asked some of them, like, why do you need engagement if you're okay with no marriage? And the responses have been like, well, I still want to feel like there's that deeper level of commitment, but we don't have to get married on paper and all these different things. And I'm not going to say that no one genuinely feels that way. I will say that I feel at least some of them, if not all, they're fooling themselves by trying to find this in-between compromise, all right? And I think if the concern is, because I know for some the other concern is, well, I make a lot of money. These were women. I make a lot of money. I don't want to deal with the financial ramifications of it. I'd rather be protected by not even getting married. My thing is, okay, then why don't we just do the prenup? I don't understand why we have to stop short of just marriage altogether. And I will do a video breaking down prenups, because I do feel like a lot of people have a misunderstanding of it and a very negative outlook. But it honestly is something, honestly, I feel like everybody should do it. If I'm being real, I feel like everybody should do it. But to me, it's like, why not? Because at least then you can still have your deeper commitment of marriage, and you can still protect yourself legally with the prenup. And there are some other methods that I'll mention when I do the prenup video of how to protect your finances and things of that nature in marriage. Either way, the point here is, if you know it's what you genuinely want, don't get yourself involved with someone who's telling you from the beginning, I'm not with it. I have no desire for it. All right? It's the same thing as a woman who wants kids and you got a man telling you he doesn't want kids. And I've dealt with clients who have tried to hold on, thinking they can convince the man, all these different things. I'm like, listen, this man has told you plain and clear he's not doing it. you're only making things more difficult for yourself. And again, for a lot of women, the longer you keep dealing with this man, the harder it is to walk away. We don't want that to happen. So address it. And again, as I mentioned in the beginning, it doesn't mean the minute you hear it, run. I think ask questions. Why is his perception that way? You know, maybe bring up that fact that you would be comfortable with a prenup, because there's a lot of men out there who they feel like women will never be okay with the prenup idea. So rather than even discuss it, just forget marriage altogether. And so in some cases, that woman simply saying, I would be cool with that, right? For some men, that might change their mind. Say, okay, well, if that's the case, I might be willing to consider this, or I'd be more open to it. So have a discussion, understand where it's coming from. But if his final stance is no, I'm not with it, and that's what you want, then you got to keep it moving. Thank you for watching this video. I pray it was helpful to you. Be sure to watch this one over here on why men suddenly act cold, or 7 reasons why a man is different. And he was just dating with the mindset of, I'm just trying to have a casual situation or just companionship right now, without full vulnerability.